Welcome, friends, to our Science of Kriya Yoga podcast. I'm Nayaswami Narayan, and it's my joy to share today with Nayaswami Pranaba. And just as a way of brief introduction, for those who don't know Pranaba, he's a pioneering member of Ananda Sangha, came in the 70s to Ananda and helped found a number of Ananda communities with time in Dallas, Portland, Seattle, I believe, Italy. And for the last 20 years or more, Pranaba has served as a lead in the Sangha outreach ministry. And these are Ananda's outreach ministries like the Kriya ministry, the Healing Prayer ministry. He's helped me personally with crystal clarity, and Pranaba is just a steadfast presence. And Pranaba, it's a great joy to be able to share this time with you, but more so, I think we're both inspired around the topic of Kriya. And I wanted to start just by asking you a personal question, and maybe you could share a little bit about, because I don't know that much as well, what was the catalyst for you that attracted and drew you to this path of Kriya Yoga?
Well, to step back earlier in that time, I remember around when I was 12 years old, I first had the smell of incense come into my world, and it captivated me. It was like, that's a smell I remember, not from this lifetime, obviously. And through those teenage years, I was always exploring, what was possible out there. And when I was 18, I started to meditate, not on the path of Kriya Yoga, but another approach to meditation that was popular at that time. And I just felt this is what my life is about at that point. And that was in 1973. And truthfully, which I'm not saying this is something to be proud of, but it's interesting that I've never missed a day of twice-a-day meditation since this time of year, March in 1973.
Wow.
But it got me tuned into different spiritual writings, and one of my brothers, plus a number of other people, encouraged me to read the Autobiography of a Yogi.
One of your brothers, is that you said? Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then I attended University of Manitoba, which I enjoyed, but then I realized after a year that I want to explore something else. So I decided to travel around Europe. And it was interesting. I brought two books with me that were very, very, very important books. One was The Hitchhiker's Guide to Europe, and the other one was The Autobiography of a Yogi.
Wow.
So that's where I read it. I landed, flew from Canada to Glasgow in Scotland, and I was staying in youth hostels and hitchhiking around. But after a few nights days in Glasgow, I went on to Edinburgh, and I was staying at the youth hostel, and they had a little parlor room. And the first evening there, I was starting to read the Autobiography of a Yogi. And these other young people came in and started to talk to me and, where I was from and where they were from. And they said, "What are you reading?" And I showed them. And one of them said, "You're not reading that crap, are you?" And I was like, Swami Kriyananda talks about holding the autobiography close to his chest.
Yeah.
And this is before I knew anything about Swami Kriyananda. I more or less did that same thing. And it became that trip a pilgrimage of meditating, again, not with Yogananda's techniques at that point. But when I came back, it was almost just under a year that I was gone hitchhiking. And it was a pilgrimage because I basically ended up meditating everywhere. And for a time, I went to Israel to spend time on a kibbutz, a spiritual community, because there was a longing in my heart to pursue what a spiritual community would be like. And and I had this, it was like the Karma Yoga program we have at Ananda Village at the Expanding Light Retreat. And, you're working with the residents of the community. And I had this big room to myself, but they said, oh, there's someone coming in a few days. And I thought, well, I have to explain to him about meditation, and all of that, and the awkwardness of that. Well, he arrived, and the kibbutz I was on focused on vineyards to produce wine. And this guy's family was from Burgundy, France.
Yeah.
And so he was coming to share some of the knowledge. And he was my age. I was 20 years old at the time. And so I said, by the way, I get up and I meditate. Yeah, I just learned to meditate.
Huh.
So we had the two of us. And then these two guys from Tasmania, the island off of Australia, came. And they had just learned to meditate.
Wow.
And then one of the young women in the kibbutz, one of the residents, found out about us, and she learned to meditate, all in the last number of months. I've been meditating almost 2 years at that time. So we had this meditation group.
Wow.
And I talked to them about the Autobiography of Yogi being suddenly a surge of energy in my understanding spiritually. And then I spent time in the desert. At that time, Israel still retained the Sinai Peninsula, which, is where Moses went through and all of that. And there were a bunch of people at the Gulf of Eilat, which comes, the little finger that comes off of the Red Sea going northwest. A bunch of people were there just hanging out, meditating and so forth. So at night, it was like a satsang. We'd have a meal, a vegetarian meal that people would help make. And then often there'd be music. And so this was in 1975. So the music of that time, which dates it, are things like Cat Stevens, Donovan, kind of quasi-spiritual songs. And then suddenly someone played this song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart's song. And I thought, what is that? And I was told it was one of Yogananda's chants. So that started one more piece after reading the Autobiography to feel, what I'm missing in my approach so far is devotion. So when I went back to Canada, I start to explore, well, what is this that I'm really searching for? And this woman that I'd given the Autobiography of Yogi to said, so have you tuned into things that you can do with this? I said, no. It was like a veil was over my mind. And so then I saw in this magazine, I think it was called East-West Journal, which was around at that time in the 1970s. It had a little classified ad that said spiritual apprenticeships in spiritual community. And it talked about construction, beekeeping, organic gardening, all this kind of stuff. And so I thought, oh, that sounds exactly what I want, a spiritual focus of community. And at the same time, this woman who I'd given the Autobiography to and said, hey, have you tuned into these things? She said, there's these lessons from Self-Realization Fellowship. I said, no, didn't tune into it at all. I mean, I didn't tune into the organizational side in the Autobiography at all.
Yeah.
So I wrote away to Ananda Village, and I wrote away to SRF, and SRF took forever to get back to me. And Prakash, who's still around these days, Nayaswami Prakash, he sent me a handwritten letter as a response and said, yeah, we have these programs and things like that are happening. And so I started taking the SRF lessons. And lesson 3 at that time was in the SRF lessons where it's quoting Master saying to use this visualization. And it's the one on expanding sphere of light and joy. So at that day, when I got that lesson in the mail, I stopped my other technique. And it was like 4 months before the lessons give you the Hong Saw technique, at least back then. And so all I did every day, instead of my usual meditation, I just did the technique of visualization.
Wow.
And it was like, it was a godsend in many ways. One, it allowed me to release real clearly the mantra I was using in my other style of meditation. And two, it really focused me in on the spiritual eye, because that's what that visualization is. So it was like a real boon in these two ways. And then learning the energization exercises via lessons was fascinating, because when I first saw someone do them, they weren't at all what I had been doing for a long time, because you can't sense what they really are in print. But I determined at that point to go visit Ananda and take part in the spiritual apprenticeship program with Prakash. But this is like late 1977 that I'd written, and I knew I couldn't get time free from my job until the summer of 1978. So that all worked out fine, because then I could meditate with Hong Sa and the Om technique. And then I took this 64-hour bus ride to Ananda from Canada. But the other thing that I did in that time was I found out about the path, which is now called the New Path of Swami Kriyananda. And so I ordered it from Ananda Publications, which is what it was called then. And it was only available in hardcover, which is really precious. So when I read that, I thought, wow, this is exactly what I want to do with my life. And so I ended up here on a hot July day. It was 108 degrees.
1978?
Walked onto the property, and I remember saying softly to myself, this is my home. And I knew it wasn't that the physical property of Ananda Village was my home, but Ananda was my home. And it turned out that way. Over the decades since then, Parvati, my wife, and I have spent a lot more time away from Ananda Village, like you described earlier. In that way.
Could you talk to us a little bit about that, Pranaba? What did that mean to you, that Ananda, not the place, but Ananda was your home?
I felt vibrationally, it was like me smelling incense when I was 12 years old. It felt like this was it. This was clearly...
It was yours.
Yeah, it wasn't that I was just doing things to get somewhere. It was there. It just felt like this was real to me. And I just really got absorbed in it. I mean, back then, it was referred to as boot camp, that we got up at 4:30 in the morning, and from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning, we had the sadhana that went through energization, yoga postures, and meditation. And I, of course, hadn't had Kriya at that point. But then Swami Kriyananda was doing a lot, giving weekend satsangs, classes, Sunday services, and other things. And so it was a deep immersion into that experience. And for me, Hong Sa, this is very interesting, that when I first learned Hong Sa and started practicing, it felt like, again, it was the culmination of going inside in a deeper way. Because the approach of meditation I had used previously was using a mantra more just as a mantra. So when Hong Sa came into my life and focused on the spiritual eye, as well as, in a sense, that mantra of Hong Sa, and then emphasized this important thing at the end of technique, to reserve a period of time to just be absorbed in that connective energy of true meditation. Those pieces added to how I understood meditation just felt so different, and so not different that it was strange to me, but different from what I was experiencing in meditation. It just felt like this was integrating all of it. And then when I learned the Om technique, honestly, I couldn't figure it out heads or tails. What was this? But that quickly started to feel the true experience of meditation rather than the practice of meditation. So that helped me tremendously. And then starting to read more of Yogananda's book as well as The Path. And then I read Cooperative Communities, How to Start Them and Why, and Swami Kriyananda's book, Yoga Postures for Self-Awareness. Later he changed it to Ananda Yoga for Higher Awareness. But all these pieces really came together, and being here for the first time, I loved it. Going to morning meditation, 5 o'clock, didn't seem much of a stretch to me. And being with other people, being in satsang, and watching, being aware of those that had Kriya, I could sense there's something even more. And a few people, I think Prakash included, said, seems like you're further along on this path with the techniques especially, that maybe you should apply for Kriya at Spiritual Renewal. Back then, for a long time, for decades, Spiritual Renewal was always the last week in August.
Right.
And then it moved to early August, and then it moved to, we have it now at the end of June. But I thought to myself, no, I'm really going deep as it is. And we were studying what is now called the Art and Science of Raja Yoga, which is called, at that point, 14 Steps to Perfect Joy.
Yeah.
And I just felt there was so much there to take deeper and refine, as well as new things, that when I went home to Canada, I started a meditation group for Ananda, and I just studied those lessons again and again and again, and just felt there was so much to draw from that I really felt that was important. And then I went back to Ananda Village here in August of 1979 and took Kriya initiation at the end of that with Swami Kriyananda at the previous temple at the meditation retreat, because that collapsed some years later and a new one was built, which is the one we have now. So it was, and taking that Kriya initiation, because it was full, it was several hundred people in the temple, and I don't know how many new people, but probably a couple dozen were new Kriya bonds. But afterwards, I just couldn't be around people. I just felt it was so real as a touching experience. Because for me, the ceremony was really what was happening for me. Learning the technique, I knew there'd be a Kriya review the next morning. And I got it. But what really was there was the ceremony, the experience of really feeling through Swami Kriyananda the touch of our guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, and our other gurus. I just felt like I need to be alone. So for those that aren't familiar with Ananda Village and our seclusion retreat, is that adjacent to it is this mountain called Ball Mountain. And it's a sacred indigenous native place, has been for hundreds of years. I just went up there by myself and just wanted to make sure that I could continue feeling. I was in tears. I just felt it was such a sweet blessing that I just knew I had to wrap as much of myself in that experience. And then the review filled in some of the gap of the technique part. But again, from that day, I think it was August 25th, 1979. Again, I've been fortunate, good karma, I think, that I've never missed a day of Kriya twice a day since that day.
Wow. Well, that's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that story about the way that first, the way that you resonated with meditation, and that it just felt familiar, and then coming to Ananda, and the techniques and just the lifestyle, it sounds like it just, it was yours. That's what I was trying to articulate. And that the beauty and the blessing of receiving Kriya with Swami Kriyananda there at the seclusion retreat and holding the space for it. And I'm very glad you brought that up, because that's partly what I wanted to discuss with you, because many times we do get questions about Kriya, and one of the questions is, well, why can't I just learn the Kriya through a YouTube video like this or another book? You guys do online courses. So maybe for the new person that's tuning in, that's interested in Kriya, or for the Kriya Band that's renewing, what would you say about that, why we give Kriya as an initiation and why it's important? Yeah,
I mean, personally, I'm proof in eating of the pudding of that, of the experience that I just recalled to you. But Yogananda said this very important thing, he gave the description of the spiritual journey that each one of us is on in terms of what really allows that to be fulfilled. How do we reach the state of self-realization? And he said of the 100% of that journey for each one of us, that 25% of that is our part. Mm-hmm. Granted, it's 100% of our part, but it's only 25% of that full spiritual journey. And then he said, the next 25% is the Guru's blessings for you, guiding that. And then 50% is the grace of God. And that really indicates this whole thing, why something like an initiation would be there, because it's really, to a real way, is to emphasize the offering into something larger than ourselves. Mm-hmm. To feel the power of God's grace being real to us. And the techniques, in a sense, really allow us to align ourselves with that grace. Mm-hmm. Both Paramhansa Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda often would state that on our efforts alone, we can't reach the pinnacle of that experience. We won't be enlightened, we won't be liberated. But if we can create that dynamic self-offering and flow of the techniques, especially something like Kriya, then that magnetism creates the possibility of the Guru's blessings and God's grace. Mm-hmm. And so, looking back on initiation in my own personal experience, it was definitely that. It just felt like I was there, and the idea of offering, because part of the initiation, which is traditional in other traditions as well, of a flower representing our devotion to the altar, a fruit reflecting that it's representing karma that we're releasing, and a donation representing, this isn't just for me, this is an expansive thing, and this donation represents my careful willingness to let these touch other people. Yeah. And just the idea of being in a setting where that emphasis is magnetized in that experience, that for me it was very real, to the degree that I really was happy that the Kriya Review the next morning was there to really implant the technique in a stronger way. But I think it has to do with this other phrase that Paramhansa Yogananda would say about Kriya. Kriya Yoga plus devotion works like mathematics. It cannot fail. Mm-hmm. That devotion is really what's there in initiation. It's a way to bring intention into an integrated experience. And so for those that are open, as Jesus said, for those that have ears to hear, they will hear. And same with anything in our lives. If we're ready there, if we're already there, not completely there, we're not perfected in it, but our willingness is opening up to that journey, then much more can happen than just our part doing what we're doing. Yeah. But we still have to do our part.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. It's the reminder of the importance of the initiation, from what I'm hearing you say, to hold the space for us to receive that divine grace. One of Swami's last books was called Cooperating with Grace.
With grace, yeah.
So I wonder, could you talk a little bit about how your experience of that has been, without, of course, giving the technique, because we're not sharing the technique in a video like this, but how the technique and the lifestyle of a Kriyaban has helped you cooperate with grace, so to speak.
I mean, there's a tendency in most of us, maybe all of us, as we're really entering, in the journey of a deep tradition that relates to a guru-disciple relationship, and the other aspects of it, is that we can tend, and again, almost everyone does, not everyone, but in the beginning, there's a tendency to say that, okay, here's the meditation, the techniques, and over here is devotion. Because there are many traditions in the Indian way of spirituality where the devotion is highlighted. Mm-hmm. The chanting, the ceremonies, the dancing and all that, they have tremendous magnetism to really nurture that connection, but they don't have the techniques. And on our path, it can happen that the technique becomes, oh, I need to perfect the technique. But I remember one time, and this was after a number of years of having the Kriya technique, that suddenly in the middle of a meditation, I had this feeling as I was doing the technique that I was offering up rose petals, because part of the ceremony involves receiving rose petals as a blessing. But in this meditation, that suddenly I could feel, visually it was there internally, but more I could feel, it was like I was offering up the rose petals up to the divine. And then the rose petals came down, of course, and they were blessing me. And I thought that really captures this idea that if we're really there at the center, devotion isn't something we do. Devotion is the experience of true meditation. It is the true experience of our spiritual unfoldment. And I thought that would have to be the case. You know, whatever tradition, whatever religion, whatever approach we have, those are key elements that really allow us to be in it rather than outside looking in. And I think that's really why Kriya Yoga is what it is. It brings us into our true center, and in that center, then we can feel more dynamically, how do we act from that center? How do we focus from that center? And how do we become that center? And so, you know, I remember when I came back from my hitchhiking around Europe and reading the Autobiography of Yogi, that I went to a group meditation from this other way of approaching meditation. And it was interesting because the people leading it were the people that I came onto that journey with, and now they're there with the teachers. And there was a time for questions and answers, and I asked the question, so what about devotion? And the person responding, again, I knew this woman, she was very honest. And this is a whole room full of people. It wasn't just me. She said, it's important, but you won't find it here. Very revealing.
Honest answer.
Yeah, because it was more technique oriented, more the science of it, which is of course what we have. Because if you think of, in the Autobiography of Yogi, the chapter on Kriya Yoga, Yogananda gave it the title, The Science of Kriya Yoga.
Right.
Not the devotion of Kriya Yoga.
Yeah.
So I've always appreciated that part of it. But this woman saying, when I asked about devotion, that it's important, but you won't find it here. Then what I felt was, that's where I want to focus more of my energy. I want to feel more that connection of what that is, not hearing about it or reading about it. And so with Kriya, knowing that, that same feeling in that initial initiation in 1979, I sensed it, you know, probably on a soul level. I'm not sure my mind really sensed it or totally cognized it, but there was something deeper I could feel. And that's why I was in tears, because I knew there was something more in a joyous way that was happening at that time that I'm not sure I could even describe it at that time or understand.
Maybe you felt it was important, and you did find it.
I did.
And you did find it there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And from what you're sharing, it's like the science of devotion. I think that's the attractive thing for myself. And I know for you too, that with Kriya and the way that Master, when we say Master, I mean Yogananda, Paramhansa Yogananda, the way he gave Kriya is very balanced, right? It's connecting your heart, but how do you, what's that chant? In secret in my soul, I will gather blossoms for thee, like you were saying, and lay them at thy feet. But there's an actual technique for you to do that. Could you talk a little bit about, I mean, you had that beautiful and powerful experience in your first initiation, and then I don't know when it happened for you, maybe it was with Swami, where then you began sharing Kriya. could you talk a little bit about that transition and how that helped, integrate your practice through the service and the sharing of Kriya?
Yeah, very much. Because, as I said, I took that first Kriya initiation in 1979. And then just a few years later, Swami Kriyananda asked me to move to San Francisco to help run the Ananda House ashram and the center there. Well, immediately that drew me into helping people with Kriya. Not giving Kriya initiation, I wasn't a Kriya Acharya at that time, but supporting people and getting into it. And what it allowed me to do was, in a natural way, spend more focus on Kriya for myself. And so that continued that way. Because, as you mentioned in the beginning, and especially when Parvati and I got together and we got married, that we spent a lot of time in different settings with Ananda, outside of Ananda village. And so we're in primary roles that were helping people a lot more. And so Kriya became one of those areas where that was important, to be there. And even then, there were only a few Kriya Acharyas beyond Swami Kriyananda. So that worked out really well in a sense of growing up even more integrated in Kriya from that way of approaching to help other people. And then when we moved back to Ananda village in 2004, same year as Nayaswami Narayan moved to Ananda village from the East Coast.
Right. That's right.
There was more involvement with Kriya when Nayaswami Devarshi took over from Nayaswami Dhyana as being the directors of the Kriya Sangha here, that I became much more involved in that, helping people prepare in that way. And what that really meant was, I digested the Kriya materials. I just didn't read them, but it was more the sense, that it felt like they were imbuing more and more of not only the teachings, the techniques, but the vibration. And that became more and more real. That I just really refined my own practice, the subtleties and all of that, but also just the obvious things. There were things that I realized, because from the beginning of the path of Kriya Yoga, or just learning to meditate through Ananda and Yogananda's approach, we do things like diaphragmatic breathing. And at first you just do it because it's what you're told to do. You're taught that, and you do it. And it makes sense in a certain way. But as time evolved and went on, in my Kriya practice, I start to feel more attracted to emphasize that in a more refined way and do more of it, not less of it. Because part of me felt like, that's basic stuff. I'm already concentrated, I'm in there. But I thought, well, let's just see if I explore this. And so part of the whole idea of the deeper techniques, such as Kriya Yoga, is to explore it in the way that it's taught.
Yeah.
Certainly from Yogananda, but also from Swami Kriyananda, just because he was so attuned, speaking of Swami Kriyananda, to Yogananda, that you could feel that's what was being offered, that he was an instrument in this pure way. And so I always tried to tune in. I found this thing just with chanting, for instance, which is an important part of our path, that when Swami Kriyananda would lead a satsang or a Sunday service or a class, when he chanted, I'd always just listen. The first time through, the first verse or two, just listen so I could be in that vibration of what that chant was coming through Swami Kriyananda. Because there's subtleties at times that he was tuning into a vibration or a consciousness, whatever. And by listening, I could feel more what was going on there. Well, the same applies to the techniques of meditation, certainly Kriya, that you're tuning in, you're again offering yourself into, how is this happening now? Not just generally, but to me now in this meditation. And that helped me a tremendous amount. And then working a fair amount with Nayaswami Devashi with Kriya, then at one point he said, it seems that you'd be ready to be a Kriyacharya, someone that offers Kriya to other people. And I was surprised, to tell you the truth. I mean, not out of humility, I just was surprised because I just felt I was doing well offering supportive Kriya without that. And he just said, no, this is the time for this to happen. And so I felt humbled by it more than anything else. So at that point, I would read and reread the Kriya lessons even more, and other materials that was, or watch the videos of Swami Kriyananda and so forth. Because it wasn't so much the stuff part, the details. It was wrapping myself in that aura of Kriya. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really the essence of the spiritual path for each of us. If we're a beginner on the spiritual journey, or we're a long-time Kriyaban, it's exploring with refinement my own self-realization.
That's a beautiful approach for us to take with our practice of Kriya. It's almost like you're talking about being a spiritual scientist, having that spiritual curiosity. You started on a pilgrimage, hitchhiking, and you had the hitchhiker's manual and the sort of the yogi's manual,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is really important for us to remember that keep that spirit alive, that we're on this journey, as Master said, to self-realization. Yeah. What are some of the other attitudes, Pranaba, that you would emphasize, again, for a new person or those of us practicing for years, that make our Kriya practice and lifestyle successful?
There are many, and part of it has to do with, again, us exploring those things. You know, many times I've read something from Yogananda or Swami Kriyananda, and I'll think, this is something that I can explore further, to make it more real to myself. But things like seva, which is selfless service, to me, it's just another side of Kriya Yoga, in a sense. Mm-hmm. The word Kriya actually means action. And so it ties into that idea. It's a refined, more subtle action when we talk about Kriya in that way. But it really then filters into how we're living our lives. And so I've always felt that, being part of Ananda, that selfless service is meditation in the flow of movement, of energy, of touching other people in that way. And so the idea of karma yoga, or seva means that selfless service, karma is working out karma. And the difference I like to emphasize, karma yoga is the important phrase. It's not about karma, it's about karma yoga. Mm-hmm. Yoga meaning that oneness through that acting as an instrument of selfless service. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that the doing of it is what's important, it's the consciousness behind it. So you can see readily it ties into Kriya Yoga. But also, for many years now, I've emphasized a lot more of kindness and compassion, because you can presume upon yourself that you have those, but the difference is to make them active. Because we could substitute love, for instance, but love is a little bit more challenging for a lot of people. There's an idea of love, but what does that really translate into our daily lives with other people? Mm-hmm. In a sense, kindness is that activating part of love. Because kindness can mean a glance, eye-to-eye contact. It can mean a touch on the shoulder. It can mean something you're doing for another person. It can be a variety of things that then allows love to be connected in a real way. And compassion is simply a deeper level of kindness, where compassion is clearly where we're activating that kindness into even more of how do I support a person, the world around me, whatever it might mean. And again, that ties in so readily and deeply into our meditation and Kriya, because to have that feeling of kindness and compassion in meditation and Kriya becomes different than just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
You really can feel what that is. It's not like, oh, what is kindness? What is compassion? You know it because you're, through Kriya, allowing a shift in consciousness that has more room for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And as you open up more room for it to happen, it deepens your meditation. So I think there are numerous attitudes that we could go through. I was thinking the other day that, when we have willingness to be an instrument, much like the prayer of St. Francis, it then allows us to feel that, well, in a sense, you're wrapping your aura around others. And that's a beautiful way of understanding how we live our lives. We're wrapping our aura around others. We're including them, not in the details, perhaps never their behavior, but we're wrapping, in a sense, our aura around their soul qualities. And that will filter into their expression of those soul qualities. So it's a nice way to see.
I love that you emphasize kindness as a way to deepen our Kriya and bring it, I think you said, that part of activating love in daily life. Swami has that song, I think it's Brothers One, Life Beneath the Surface.
Unites.
Binds everyone to me, unites everyone to me. So you're speaking of, this is where Kriya helps us. It's a very practical science in that we actually feel our unity with all life, so to speak. What about, because there's a lot in our world today that's trying to block that feeling of unity. Yeah. There's a lot of polarization, of bifurcation, just I, my, me, mine mentality. When someone, a Kriyaban or anybody, is hitting up against that friction, and they plateau in their practice, or they're just feeling, outright discouraged, what do you recommend?
Yeah, these are real things that are going to happen, in our lives. And in a way, for us as devotees that really have the tools of meditation and devotion, it's a blessing. But you don't want to be flippant about saying it's just a blessing. You want to really tune into why it's a blessing. And it comes from this, that, a good example. For a number of us years ago, Ananda as a whole used Yogananda's Peace and Harmony prayer. And it has two parts. And the original concept is that you use it when you have difficulties with an individual, a person. And then you would pray for yourself. So you'd repeat 10 times, if you're dealing with another person, Lord, fill this person with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. You'd repeat that 10 times. And then you do 3 repetitions for yourself. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. And we adapted it, about 10 years ago to say for the world. We'd say, Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. And then 10 times, and then 3 times, Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. And it's interesting because I was talking with someone when we were doing this. It was a brother of mine, actually. That's right. It was one of my brothers. And because he was, like a lot of people do, they use cynicism and sarcasm in a sense as a protective self-defense mechanism. Because they see the world behaving in a way that it shouldn't. There's cruelty, there's harshness, there's demeaning words, demeaning actions, and separation. And he was just going on and on, So he was being caught by the same thing that he was feeling was not a good thing. And I said to him, well, at Ananda, we've been exploring this interesting thing of saying this prayer of peace and harmony. And I went through it with him. And I heard this long pause over the telephone with him. And he said, that's different. That's hopeful. And it's something I can feel in myself. I can feel more hope in the midst of the world not change. The world's not going to change necessarily because we're doing this. But I can feel in myself, I have an approach to respond to that with. Mm-hmm. And I think our whole spiritual life is geared towards creating a magnetism that doesn't so much confront that darkness or that heaviness, it supersedes it. Mm-hmm. Think about this. Think about people being hurt in a relationship. Common for all of us, I think. The tendency when we're hurt in the heart is that we tend to protect ourselves by putting a wall around the heart. One of the songs I remember from the 1960s is Dionne Warwick's song, I'll Never Fall in Love Again. It was a very popular hit. And that's what happens. The tendency is to default to, I don't want to open my heart anymore. I've been hurt too much. I'm going to protect it. Well, in essence, what you're doing is you're doubling up on the pain. What really makes us invulnerable isn't to protect it that way. It's to magnetize even more, to actually supersede whatever's coming to us. Mm-hmm. That with energy, with love and kindness, whatever it might be, is that's what we're really doing in our lives, and we've forgotten. And once we say, okay, the world is a challenging place, but how do I insert, for instance, again, kindness? When I'm in a situation, someone's pressing in their negativity on us, we may not, hold up our hands and say, I'm going to bless you now. Yeah. But inwardly, we say that I got into this habit, I'm still doing it, is I chant Om whenever I feel a disturbance in the force, in the ether or in the world around me, to the point where it's, I wouldn't say automatic, but it's my conditioned response of lifting up always. Mm-hmm. And so last fall, I was in a supermarket and I was at the checkout counter, and there's this woman with a lot of things in her shopping cart that she's putting on the conveyor belt. And she dropped this glass bottle of juice. And it just went spectacularly. And I said, Om, out loud. It was so amazing. And I said, did I say that? I mean, all these people were around. But that was my natural response, is not to say, oh, that's too bad, but it be in the vibration of Om, which is expansive. And I thought, we all can do that in these little ways. If we do it in the little ways, those big, you turn on the news and you realize, I'm not coping with this very well. I mean, one, watch less of the news or digest less news. But two, stop and do a healing prayer. Mm-hmm. When I first came to Ananda that summer of 1978, it was just when the healing prayer ministry was started by who now is Nayaswami Shivani, who's over at Ananda Sisi. She really set in motion this thing. And I thought, this is as much a key as anything. And when I went back to Canada, every Saturday, the job I had at that point, I only worked half a day on Saturdays. Every Saturday afternoon, I meditated longer and did an hour of healing prayers. The healing prayers was as significant as my meditation at that time, and continues to be the way that when I feel the negativity, I know that I have tools real to me. They're not like, what do I need to do? I almost constantly make sure I'm sending healing prayers out, whether it's to an individual that's having a difficult time, to our world leaders, whatever it might be.
This is very important. I mean, what you're talking about, Swami would say, be a cause, not an effect, right, as a yogi. And so rather than get sucked into the negativity of what's happening, we all know that. Yeah. I mean, that's easy. Yeah. But to be a cause and to, like that conversation you had with your brother, to shift the energy in a positive direction. So we could do that, right? As soon as we feel
in the instant, yeah.
Lord, fill this person or fill the world with peace and harmony. That's a very practical.
And the other thing that seems so simple that it, one, either gets overlooked, it doesn't get its respect, is simply do deep diaphragmatic breathing. When you feel something's bothering you, that there's a negativity entering your aura or your consciousness, in that moment, to stop and do deep breathing. Science has shown this, but more importantly, we feel it as a direct thing, is that it changes how the nervous system responds to stimuli. Mm-hmm. And literally within 30 seconds, there's a difference in how you are relating to those stimuli that are negative. And then that being the first step, and then using a blessing as a way to increase the positive vibration, either locally or globally, whatever it might be. It's like the table has turned.
Yeah.
You're not subject to those conditions anymore.
Yeah.
The conditions aren't going to change necessarily, but you're not subject to them.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I heard this, it might have been Swami that said this early on in my time at Ananda. He said, essentially meditation doesn't change stress. And I thought, that's peculiar. And then he refined what he was saying. He said, what meditation does, it completely alters the impact of stress. Meaning, if you're living in a large city and you've got a lot of traffic, gridlock traffic, rush hour traffic, your meditation may not affect that gridlock, but it'll affect what that impact of that stress is on you. And I thought, that's the only way to look at it, because if we think we're going to change the world, that's almost a stress added onto itself, Right. So it's more that, no, I can change myself. And in that, and this is really important at this time for the globe and for what's happening, is that, in a sense, we've been given the opportunity, exploring a spiritual path, to really add that positive magnetism to the world. Yeah. It's not like, no, this is really the invitation from the divine for each one of us to really say, I can be an instrument. I can help. It may not appear to be much, but it doesn't take much to really change you and the people, like my brother, feeling this change, just me describing something. I think that's important. Yeah. Not that we take it as, this is my responsibility, my dharma, but more in the sense, this is my opportunity. Yeah. When I start feeling down from all this stuff, I can do that diaphragmatic breathing. I can send out healing prayers. I'm changed. It will cause change to happen.
It's like you're reminding me of what Yogananda said, change yourself, and you've done your part in changing the world, right?
Because you never know what karma is. I mean, he said that often in the wonderful book that Crystal Clarity Publishers has, The Essence of Self-Realization. There's this wonderful thing. He said, our part is not to worry about the karma. Our part is to move forward with the energy that magnetizes and increases who we are. Yeah. I thought, of course.
I love how you were saying before, it's bringing in a whole new energy, or that supersedes, that inspires in a way. Yeah. Could you share a little bit, Pranaba, because now what we hear a lot is about technology and AI and all of this. And, the thought came to me, we have artificial intelligence, but let's not forget intelligence. So could you talk though about how Kriya, because there's such an emphasis on, the technology of AI and computers and blah, blah, blah. But can you talk to us about Kriya as a technology? And I mean, you were just kind of touching on it, how we can use that for our own self-improvement and, divine downloads, so to speak, and why that's important now.
Yeah, it's very, very important, it's not more important now than ever. It's just more that it seems to be the pressures of duality, of delusion, of Maya, are pressing in with greater energy. But each generation has its own karma to work out. But this is the thing, which I always appreciate in Swami Kriyananda, that he was always willing to explore technology in the outer sense. Yeah. Ananda actually, in the 1990s, live streamed Sunday services well before most people did. We got into online, as you well know. Nayaswami Narayan and his wife, Nayaswami Dharmadevi, were at the beginning part of online with Ananda really coming into fruition. Well, I remember, we were wanting to do webinars, remember?
Yeah.
And our guiding reference point was the Chamber of Commerce doing webinars. Well, all they were PowerPoints with someone speaking. They weren't really engaging. And I thought, suddenly we exploded, thanks to this great soul and Dharma Devi, into real stuff. And I thought, that's the way it is. AI is just a more pressurized container of that intelligence. And what that means, though, for us is that, we need to be even more aware of being always in our center. Because you can see what's happening with AI and its influence from a chat GPT or Claudia or whatever version of it is, that it can overwhelm us. But one of our friends here, Vayu, said something that really, really touched me. He's in charge of our tech department. So he's very savvy and he's been using AI for a number of years. But he said this thing that represents sort of what we're talking about, Narayan. He said, now like if you use something like Outlook and you're responding, it'll have these little boxes of how to begin your response. Thank you.
Yeah.
No problem. And he says, even though I'm going to say thank you, I'm going to type in thank you. And why? Because it's an expression of my consciousness rather than just touching the button.
Wow.
And I thought, that really is how we can approach it. That technology will always be there around, and increasingly so. But we're only in the beginning of this age called Dwapara Yuga. And I was saying this the other day to a number of people. I said, remember in Star Trek, and then I had these puzzled looks that not all these people knew what Star Trek was, but there was mind meld. And I thought, of course, in the higher ages, that's how we will have it. So we bypass artificial intelligence into superintelligence sharing. But that's really possible now. You can sense this, a good way to use, AI, a lot of people do, and a lot of people here now is chat GPT. So, maybe you write out an email, you write out a document, you're writing out, a memo or whatever, and you're wanting to refine a little bit, maybe because you're tired and you're busy and, you haven't done your best and you don't want to write it 10 times. And you use chat GPT as an example, and it comes up with ideas. What we've been given as devotees with a spine and consciousness is the capacity for discernment. And it's called viveka in Sanskrit. And it's an important, ever increasingly important tool to discern, especially with vibration, what's going on. And so, as I said, Swami Kriyananda all explored different technologies, but he always had discernment. He was able to see, no, this isn't appropriate, what's happening with this.
Yeah.
Let's step back and see that my energy, my consciousness, my heartfelt thoughts are in this experience.
Because one of the principles that Swami gave us, people are more important than things. And so that using AI and these things as tools to help us, like this medium, connect is wonderful. Yeah. But we never want to put the technology before the people. Yeah. It's a tool to help us connect more deeply.
Yeah, and that's the gift. The tools are always going to be there, have always been there. And it's just a matter of, it's like Yogananda talked about television when it came out in the 30s and 40s, that he called it the greatest tool of Satan. My sense is he said it because of that time, that it was overwhelming people, but it was still a productive tool if you could see it as a tool rather than it using you as a tool.
Yeah.
And that's what technology tends to do, because it's the latest thing. AI is the latest expression of that.
Right.
It starts to use us.
Yeah.
And all we need to do, well, this is the challenge. We need to be centered And that's why Kriya applies to science, is that if we're centered, then the expression is the expression, not the reality. And that's not how a lot of people relate to it. They're buying into the expression is the reality, but the reality is us in God. And once we get, and it's not like we're jumping into that perfected experience of that. We're moving, aligning ourselves, and as we align more of that opens up. Because where you put your attention, that's what will become your focus point. And so if we're doing it in the outer expression only, we'll be lost. Or it's like walking through landmines. It's not going to be good. But if we can say, hey, I'm coming from the center of who I am, the origin of who I am, then originality comes from the expression from that origin. Well, that creates then the possibility, even using technology and things like AI, in the same way. It's a creative expression of who I am, but it isn't who I am.
Yeah, I love how you said that, we're using it's not using us.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I think I remember one time Yogananda, he started enjoying ginger ale.
Yes.
Somebody sent him ginger ale wherever he went, and then he said one day he realized the ginger ale was drinking him. He wasn't drinking the ginger ale.
Yeah.
So I think that aptly applies, like you were saying, to AI and technology. I know we're wrapping up here time-wise, but is there anything, coming back to Kriya, that you wish I had asked that I hadn't asked that you would like to?
No, your questions have been really good. Yeah, but for me, and I think it's true for all of us that explore these things, Kriya becomes the most direct way of coming to our center in God. Center everywhere, circumference nowhere, as Yogananda said. Yeah. And it has to do with that we're always opening up to it. It's an endless possibility that's before us. And when we have that attitude, that awareness of how it's happening, then there is no separation from that in the rest of our lives. We're not just devotees when we're in our meditation room in front of our altar practicing the techniques. It's 24 hours a day. I remember Yogananda said that every minute of every hour, including when you're sleeping, should be the way that you're opening up to God realization in your own self. And that's why he said, before you go to sleep, to sit for at least a number of moments, just to give it all back to God. And so I remember years ago that a number of us were going up from Ananda village to Seattle to do some programs. I think it was in 1987, actually. And we stopped overnight halfway to Seattle from Northern California. And I was rooming with someone. And upon waking, we didn't use the alarm. I heard softly, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, from the other person. That's how they had trained themselves to awake.
Wow.
It was to have that on their lips, the first thing. And I thought, that is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. But I chose Om Guru. But so both upon going to sleep, I will sit and I'll tune into Yogananda, the last smile photograph of Yogananda. So in so much I even visualize it, it's what I feel. And then I just tune into that vibration and chant mentally Om Guru. And then I lie down in that vibration of Om Guru, and I feel that, and that's how I go into sleep. And so that's what Master said, you can bring that consciousness in your sleep, even if you have nightmares, you've got this background of this vibration that's always there. And then upon awakening, before I even roll over or get my feet on the floor, I feel again that last smile photo, and Om Guru comes out. And that's a wonderful way to tap into what Kriya is. Kriya is that deepening experience on the level that's the core of who we are on all levels, body, mind, and soul. And so we're nurturing that connection with the Guru being that connection between us and the divine. But we're also just being in that vibration more and more. And so Kriya, to me, just allows that to be more magnetic. It just becomes, and there are times probably for a lot of Kriya bonds, is that there are times you just feel more in the joy of the experience, and just taking the time to pause to be in that, and then to return to Kriya practice. And it's not so much, this is interesting how I feel now after these years. I don't really have a practice of Kriya. I am Kriya. I'm in the Kriya. And so I don't really think of it as practice anymore. And the word practice means several meanings. It means, getting better at something. It also means the experience of doing it. And so I've taken it as an experience of being there with it. But it makes a lot more sense to me to have that relationship to it rather than, I'm going to do Kriya to get somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm in Kriya because I'm in that experience. And it's helping me to refine it and align myself more with it. So it's a nice way to just take it a little bit more with refinement in that experience. So.
It's like what did Master's last line, samadhi, tiny bubble of laughter, and become
the sea of mirth itself.
You're talking about it's
You're
becoming.
In the mirth.
It's becoming for you.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Pranaba. This has been a real delight.
It's been a delight for me too.
Time and talk with you on Kriya. Lastly, for the person that wants to take a next step in moving towards Kriya, what would you recommend?
It depends on where they're at along the journey. If they're very much at the beginning, really tune into the techniques that Yogananda gave, because they aren't just a preliminary or preparation for Kriya. They really are the sense of Kriya, the essence of Kriya in a different expression. And so learning the basics of meditation, the basics of working with energy, they're part and parcel of what we call the path of Kriya Yoga. So Kriya Yoga just isn't that culmination of the technique of Kriya. It really is already embedded in the experience of learning meditation from the beginning. And there are online courses for that. There are in-person courses depending where you are. But they really have proven themselves to really be the way that we open up to who we really are. It's a nice way of saying it. Opening up to who we really are. And from the very beginning of being involved in these classes of meditation, people feel it. It's not like, you have to get to a certain point. You're getting it right away. You're feeling it right away. You're integrating it right away. So the Online with Ananda, Path of Kriya Yoga is a wonderful way. Even if you're someone that's not going to go on to Kriya technique itself, that initial course, which is called the Course in Meditation online, again, they're available in person if you're close to Ananda community or one of our centers or groups. They're available in that way as well. But it allows us to really take, remember I said about that love can be a little bit ethereal, disconnected, but kindness is the activating quality that makes love more real to us. So when we want to find our fulfillment, it can seem a little bit nebulous, ethereal. What does that mean? Well, by entering into it with the techniques, then you really start to feel, I'm aligning myself. This is real now, not at some point further down the road. And I think for all of us, that is the grace already coming in. And then we have the bonus of these techniques that allow us day to day really place our energy in that deepening alignment. So I think that would be my
Beautiful.
answer.
Thank you. And we'll put in the description, we'll put the link to the Ananda course in meditation, and also Devarshi's Kriya Yoga book.
Yes.
And the Ananda website, so people can find centers.
I've read Nayaswami Devarshi's book on Kriya probably 4 or 5 times now.
It's a beautiful book.
And to me, he just really was able as an instrument to capture a lot of both the usual things, but also the subtleties of it that become more apparent. Not that they're hidden mysteries. Those subtleties are able to be understood and worked with. So definitely it's a recommended resource, and for people that aren't Kriyabans as well as Kriyabans. So I'd recommend it highly. Yeah. And I'll start reading it again soon. So.
And that book is Kriya Yoga, Spiritual Awakening for the New Age. We'll put a link to it. Well, thank you so much, Pranaba.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
been a real joy, and we'll look forward to having a follow-up conversation at some point.
And thank you for all of you of tuning in and watching this, whatever point along your spiritual journey that you have. Many blessings to each of you.
Thank you to all of our donors for making it possible to share these videos and keep this channel ad-free. If you feel inspired to donate, visit ananda.org/give.